Sequels, prequels, spin-offs, TV shows, reboots, remakes, you get the idea. They are pretty much everywhere nowadays in the film industry and are produced at a rapid rate. Disney are incredibly guilty of doing all of this. But we all know why this has become a massive trend in the last 10 to 15 years. They are a lazy, safe, and very profitable investment. Okay, maybe not all the time, but you get the idea. The horror genre is no stranger to this practice either. Pretty much everyone's favourite horror icons have been, well, fallen victim to this trend over the last, 30 years. Jason and Freddy got new movies throughout the 80s and early 90s. Saw got a new outing every Halloween, which is kind of impressive, to be honest. Halloween has become abysmal, and don't even get me started on Hellraiser. But sometimes in this, bloated and stagnant land filled with multi-million-dollar companies milking every franchise they can for some good old coin, there can be some decent horror sequels sort of hidden around that don't get a lot of love. I've got two here by my side, and that is exactly what we're going to be discussing. I'm Gabe, and here are a couple of my favourite underrated sequels that you should definitely check out with your eyes, I hope. David Cronenberg's remake of the 1958 classic The Fly was reimagined as a body horror nightmare, filled with disturbing, gory effects, themes of disease, and a great cast to top it off. But how do you make a sequel to that? Well, it happened, didn't it? That's what this video is about. It released a few years later, and I've got to say, this is a sequel that definitely fell under the radar big time, but it's a good sequel nonetheless, and it has a lot more fun this time around. It takes place straight after the first film, where Brundle's child Martin is born. Gina Davis, her lookalike, dies during birth. Poor Martin here spends the vast majority of his life being monitored by Anton Bartok, the CEO of a dubious corporation that wants to carry out his father's research. But Martin is an incredibly intelligent kid though, and is basically being used to, figure out how the telepods work. As you've already know, in the first film, one of them was destroyed to save Gina Davis. They are stuck with the surviving two pods that don't really work very well. However, as Martin shares the same DNA as his father, he grows up at a rapid rate, like the lifespan of a fly, and I've got to be honest, it's a clever idea. It causes him to slowly morph, and he gradually finds out about the corporation's, intentions. He putates into a fly and goes on a rampage, killing everyone in his path that wronged him, resulting in plenty of carnage. Chris Wallace returns from the first Fly, not only helping with the practical special effects, but sitting in the director's chair, and he did a pretty good job, I can't lie. The effects are very well crafted and are just really goopy and gross. Faces melt in fly vomit, heads get squashed, and various mutations are, grotesque and twisted. Like I like my mutations. Not even this poor boy is safe. The Martin Fly hybrid was brought to life using puppetry and different rigs that look incredible and don't come off as tacky. He's got a lot more emotion and, personality this time around, which is incredibly difficult to do when someone is a fly monster. But with all the mess and carnage on screen here, it does have a silver lining. Martin does get his revenge on Bartok in the most satisfying and disturbing way possible. It's definitely a fate worse than death. It sadly doesn't have that iconic soundtrack like in the first film, but The Fly 2 is definitely a great sequel, and it does retread similar monster ideas, but it's definitely a lot of fun, and I would say go check it out. Now, I'm convinced that this next film and last film is without a doubt the most underrated and overlooked film I think I've ever seen. Shinya Tsukamoto's Tetsuo the Bullet Man is the third film in the iconic Tetsuo series that I think is pretty decent, but it doesn't do anything new for the series. It follows Anthony, a family man / salary worker, whose son is murdered in a very brutal car accident by a rather familiar face if you've seen both of the other two Tetsuo movies. Out of anger though, his body soon mutates into this scrap human hybrid, a bit like the first two movies, which is made entirely of guns. A small SWAT team is sent out to kill him, but this doesn't work out. Well, it was obvious, wasn't it? He's pretty much 90% weapon.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
He uncovers secret government experiments conducted by his dad and goes toe-to-toe with the man that started the chaos. Now, where I believe this film gets overlooked is because it doesn't have the same, well, hyperactive sort of charm of the first two films. Tsukamoto has kind of been compared to David Lynch in they kind of share a similar nightmare surrealism in they're both respectable ways, but I believe that Tetsuo is its own beast. Tetsuo is an aggressive audio-visual onslaught that pokes jabs at the rat race and foreshadows this terrifying sort of world filled with scrap metal and metallic body horror. It's up there as one of my favourite films of all time. I mean, Body Hammer is also very impressive, but the first one, that's where it lies for me. Bullet Man, on the other hand, goes in a more narrative-driven direction and sadly loses some of its iconic charm that the Tetsuo series is known for. I do love the practical effects and the transformations, they're great. It definitely does Tetsuo things, but all of the scenes have this constant grey muted colour that looks kind of bland in my opinion, and some of the action scenes are so shaky that you're going to need like a couple of barf bags to deal with that. Like, you can barely see what's going on. But this is also the very first time that Tsukamoto made a movie entirely in English, and I've got to admit I do respect this decision a lot because, well, Tsukamoto is not a native English speaker. I have to respect the effort that must have gone into it and having to sort of practice these lines over and over again to make them sound good. But sadly, like, it's nothing to really write home about because, as you all know, he's not a native English speaker, so a lot of the dialogue does come off kind of, you know, stiff and unnatural, but I do appreciate someone trying something different. But I understand the motive. I mean, I understand if you wanted to make the Tetsuo series more accessible to a Western audience, but he doesn't need to do that. Western audiences love his movies, you know, even if they're in Japanese. He didn't need that, to be honest with you. But again, I respect the decision to do that because it's very different in the series. If you are curious about the Tetsuo the Bullet Man, I would recommend you definitely give this a watch. It is a really cool movie with some really cool special effects. The practical transformations are awesome, but it doesn't really do anything new for the series, and it definitely has some problems. It's still an entertaining time that tries to stand out from the previous Tetsuo films. But yeah, if you're going to watch this one, watch 1 and 2 first, I recommend. I don't really know how to end this video, that's a bit embarrassing, isn't it? I will leave with this. What are your favourite underrated horror sequels? Let me know down below in the comments, I would love to know. If you enjoy my content, like, subscribe and support the Patreon if you're feeling generous. And yeah, see you again soon.